The closed sign was already printed. For Eliza Vance, it wasn't just a sign for the door. It was the period at the end of a 5-year sentence of grief. Her world was down to its last bag of flour when the bell chimed, and 3 little girls walked in, claiming their father had sent them for a cake. But he hadn't, and their lie was about to unravel everything. Eliza's bakery, the Daily Rise, was supposed to be her fresh start after her husband's passing. Instead, it became a tomb for her savings and her spirit. This final hour was meant for packing away the last of the dreams. But those 3 determined faces, holding out a crumpled $20 bill, presented a problem she couldn't just lock away. And the real complication was still 10 minutes away, walking down the street, completely unaware his daughters had just lied their way into a stranger's heart. For 2 years, the smell of sourdough and sugar had been the only thing that quieted the silence in her head. Eliza and Ben had sketched the layout for the Daily Rise on a napkin at the hospital, a defiant promise of a future they both knew was shrinking. He promised to build the shelves. She promised to master the perfect croissant. When he died 6 months before the grand opening, she opened it anyway, using the life insurance money to fund what her accountant later called a beautifully decorated sinking ship. The math was a brutal, simple dirge. Rent $4,000 a month, ingredients another $2,000, utilities, loans, the endless drip of costs that outran the trickle of customers. She was $87,000 in debt. The final notice from the bank, now a coaster under her coffee cup, gave her 30 days. Today was day 29. That's why the closed sign was in her hand. Not just for the day, forever. Every mixing bowl was packed. The industrial oven, her white whale, sat cold for the first time in 730 days. All that remained was the display case, a ghost town of 1 slightly stale lemon loaf and 3 macarons, and the overwhelming silence. Then the bell chimed. Eliza turned, frustration flaring. The sign was clearly turned, but in the doorway stood 3 identical girls, maybe 6 years old, with hair the color of wheat and matching white dresses with tiny pastel aprons tied around their waists. They filed in with a solemn, practiced air. The one in front, a $20 bill clutched in her fist, marched to the counter. "We need a cake. Our dad sent us." Eliza blinked, her rehearsed were closed, dying on her lips. "He sent you, alone." The second girl nodded vigorously. "He's very busy. He said to get the chocolate one with the sprinkles, for a surprise." The third girl simply stared, wide-eyed, at the lone lemon loaf. A warning bell, quieter than the door chime, went off in Eliza's mind. This was irregular, possibly alarming, but their dresses were crisp, their faces clean. They didn't look neglected, they looked determined. And in their presence, the oppressive silence in the shop lifted, replaced by a palpable, curious energy. "Honey, I'm so sorry," Eliza said, her voice softer than she intended. "I'm actually closing, for good. I don't have any cakes left. I don't even have any flour to make one." The girls exchanged a look. It was a full, silent conference. The leader's shoulders slumped. The $20 bill looked suddenly pathetic. "But it's his birthday tomorrow," she said, her voice small. "Mom always made the cake, and now she's gone, and we wanted to." The words landed in the center of Eliza's chest with the precision of a knife. Mom always made the cake, and now she's gone. She knew that sentence. She knew every variant of that sentence. She had lived in the house of always did, and now gone for years. Her professional resolve, the one that had just coldly calculated her own failure, shattered. The accountant in her head screamed. The widow in her heart overruled. "Okay," Eliza heard herself say. "Okay, I might have some things in the back, a backup bag of flour, maybe some eggs that are still okay." She was lying. She had meticulously cleaned out the back, but she couldn't send them away, not with that mission, not with that loss mirrored in their eyes. She unlocked the counter gate. "Come on, you can help, but you have to tell me your names, and your dad's name, and exactly what kind of sprinkles." For the next 40 minutes, the Daily Rise came back to life. Flour dusted the stainless steel again. The mixer whirred. The trio, who introduced themselves as Chloe, Sophie, and Grace, became a whirlwind of inefficient help. Sophie carefully cracked eggs, fishing out 2 pieces of shell with intense focus. Grace organized the sprinkles by color. Chloe, the spokesperson, dictated the design: chocolate, vanilla frosting, blue sprinkles, and happy birthday dad in red. Eliza learned fragments. Their dad was named Daniel. He was a writer. He worked at home. Mom had been gone for almost a year. She got sick like your husband, Chloe stated matter-of-factly, having spotted Ben's picture on the rear wall. Eliza froze, the sifter in her hand. The connection was laid bare, simple and devastating. As the cake layers baked, filling the shop with a warmth that had nothing to do with the oven, Eliza felt a fissure in her grief. It wasn't joy, but it was purpose. A finite, simple purpose: make a birthday cake for a sad man and his 3 little liars. But here's the thing about lies: they have a half-life, and theirs was about to expire. The cake was cooled, frosted, and lettered. It was lopsided. The D in Dad was a little shaky. It was the most perfect thing Eliza had made in months. She boxed it, refusing the crumpled 20. "Tell your dad it's a grand reopening special," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. The girls beamed, each placing a hand on the cake box to carry it collectively. They were at the door, a tiny parade of triumph, when the bell chimed again. The door opened inward. A man stood there, his expression a storm cloud of panic just beginning to clear. He was in his mid-30s, with dark, messy hair and the distracted, rumpled look of someone who lives inside his own head. He wore a charcoal blazer over a t-shirt. "Chloe, Sophie, Grace," he breathed, the name a trio of relieved scolds. "I turned around for 1 minute to find my notes and you were just—" He stopped. His eyes took in the scene. His daughters clustered around a pastel bakery box, the flour-dusted woman behind them, the closed sign on the floor behind the counter, the single lemon loaf in the otherwise empty case. His gaze moved from the cake box to Eliza's face, down to her flour-dusted apron and back to his daughters' guilty, beaming faces. The panic was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated bewilderment. Chloe, ever the spokesperson, broke the silence. She thrust the cake box toward him. "We got your cake, Dad, surprise." Daniel Hayes looked at the box. He looked at Eliza. His voice was soft, utterly lost. "I didn't send you for a cake." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't empty. It was thick, electric, and filled with the deafening sound of a story unraveling. Eliza's eyes locked with Daniel. In his, she saw the dawning horror of parental realization. In hers, he saw the confusion of a woman who had just baked her heart out for a fiction. The front door of the bakery was still open, and standing in it, his body blocking the evening light, was a man in a sharp suit holding a folded piece of paper. He smiled, a thin, legal smile. "Ms. Vance, perfect timing. I'm here for the keys." Time, for the second time that hour, stopped. The man in the suit, Mr. Alden from the bank, stood in the doorway, his practiced smile faltering as he took in the tableau. A bewildered father, 3 guilty children, a baker covered in flour, and a single, lopsided birthday cake on the counter. He cleared his throat, holding up the folded paper like a shield. "The foreclosure is effective at close of business today, Ms. Vance. I'm here for the keys and the initial walkthrough." The words, so clinical and final, shattered the fragile bubble that had formed around the cake making. Eliza's face, which had been a canvas of soft confusion, hardened into a mask of raw, public shame. This was her failure, and now it had an audience beyond the 3 little girls. Daniel Hayes instinctively stepped slightly in front of his daughters, as if to shield them from the ugliness of the word foreclosure. He looked from the banker to Eliza, understanding dawning. The empty display case, the packed boxes, the sign in her hand, it wasn't just closing for the day. It was over. I just need a minute," Eliza said, her voice thin. "Of course," Mr. Alden said, not unkindly, but with the impatience of a man with a schedule. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut, and began making notes on a clipboard, his eyes assessing the fixtures. Daniel turned to his daughters, his voice a low, controlled whisper. "You lied. You left the house alone. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? I was terrified." Chloe's bottom lip trembled. "We wanted to get you a cake, like Mom did. We saved our allowance." She held up the crumpled 20 again, the symbol of their entire doomed mission. Daniel's anger visibly deflated, replaced by a pain so acute it was almost physical. He knelt, pulling all three into a hug. "Oh, girls, you can't do that, and you can't lie." He looked over their heads at Eliza. "I am so sorry. They've never done anything like this. We're still figuring things out." Eliza nodded mutely. She understood figuring things out. Her entire adult life had been an exercise in figuring things out without Ben. Now she had failed at it. Sophie, peeking from the hug, looked at Mr. Alden, who was tapping the commercial oven and frowning. "Is the mean man taking your bakery?" "It's not mean, sweetie," Eliza said, a bitter laugh escaping. "It's business. I couldn't pay, so the bank takes it back." Daniel stood up, his writer's mind, always observing, always connecting, shifting gears. He saw the pride and devastation warring on Eliza's face. He saw the cold efficiency of the banker. He saw a story, not one to write, but one happening right in front of him. "Mr. Alden," Daniel said, his voice firmer now. "It's after hours. Surely this can wait until morning." "The paperwork says today," Mr. Alden said without looking up. "The new lessee wants possession by the weekend. We're on a tight timeline." "New lessee?" Eliza asked, the news a fresh blow. "A corporate coffee chain," Mr. Alden confirmed. "They've been waiting for this location, much more stable tenant." The finality of it was a sucker punch. Not just a failure, but a replacement. Her personal, pain-filled dream replaced by a soulless, efficient franchise. The daily rise supplanted by a global brand that served syrup in a cup. Daniel saw the color drain from Eliza's face. He acted without thinking. "What's the number?" "I'm sorry," Mr. Alden said, finally looking at him. "The total, the amount owed to stop this, right now." Eliza stared at him. "What are you doing?" $87,412, Mr. Alden recited from his file, plus today's accrued interest. Daniel didn't flinch. He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and pulled out a checkbook. It was plain, leather-bound. "And if that amount were paid in full right now, the foreclosure stops, correct?" "Dad," Chloe whispered, awestruck. Mr. Alden's professional demeanor cracked for a second, revealing sheer disbelief. "Technically, yes. A certified check or wire transfer would satisfy the debt and nullify the proceedings. But..." Daniel was already writing, his hand moving quickly. He tore out the check and held it out. "Certified. Drawn on my account at First Metropolitan. You can call and verify." The bakery was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Eliza was frozen. This was impossible. This was a fantasy. Men like this, rumpled, distracted fathers, didn't carry checkbooks that could casually erase $87,000 in debt. Mr. Alden took the check, his eyes scanning it. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number from memory, and turned away, speaking in low tones. The verification call. Eliza found her voice a harsh whisper. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Your children lied asterisk to me." Daniel met her gaze. "They lied because they're kind, and because they're heartbroken. They saw someone who could do something their mother can't anymore, and they were right." He gestured to the cake. "You did that for a stranger, for a lie, when your own world was ending. That's not nothing." "But this is a fortune," she stammered. "It's money," he said simply. "My last book did unexpectedly well. I've been sitting on it, unsure what to do with it, until now." Mr. Alden hung up the phone. He looked at Daniel with new, wary respect. "The funds are verified." He handed the check back to Daniel. But I need you to come to the branch tomorrow at 9 to formalize this. The foreclosure is paused, Ms. Vance. You have a stay of execution." Eliza felt the floor solidify beneath her feet. The weight of the debt, which had been crushing her for months, was just gone, replaced by a new, immense, and confusing weight, a debt of gratitude to a complete stranger. Mr. Alden left, the bell chiming his exit. The four of them stood in the sudden, echoing silence. "I'll pay you back," Eliza blurted out. "Every penny with interest. I'll sign anything." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want your signature. I want you to open your doors tomorrow, for real." "But why?" "Because my daughters risked a lot to get this cake from this bakery," he said. "And because I think the Daily Rise is a better name for this street than Bean there, drank that." It was the first hint of humor he'd shown, and it broke the tension. A tiny, hysterical laugh escaped Eliza. The girls giggled. Then Grace, the quiet one, walked over to the counter and pointed at the lone lemon loaf. "Can we have that too, since we're not in trouble anymore?" And just like that, the spell was broken. The crisis was averted, but a new, more complex reality was dawning. Daniel Hayes had just bought a bakery he'd never set foot in, for a woman he'd just met, because his daughters had lied to her. The ramifications of that single check were about to ripple out in ways none of them could predict. The next morning, Eliza opened. She flipped the sign to open with trembling hands. The shelves were still half bare, the display case only holding the remnants of yesterday's emergency bake, but the lights were on. News in a small neighborhood travels not like wildfire, but like a steady, penetrating drip. By 10 a.m., Mrs. Gable from the flower shop came in, having heard a wild rumor from the barber who'd heard from the mailman about a dramatic last-minute rescue. She bought 2 croissants and asked a dozen subtle questions. By lunch, a slow trickle of the curious and the loyal regulars, those who had felt too guilty to come in during the decline, drifted in. The story morphed with each retelling. A mysterious benefactor, triplets on a mission, a heroic stand against a corporate coffee chain. Eliza worked in a daze, her mind replaying the check, Daniel's calm face, the girls' smiles. She felt unmoored. She was saved, but she was now tethered to a man she didn't know. It felt less like a rescue and more like a takeover, however kindly intended. Her answer came at 2 in the afternoon. Daniel walked in, alone. He looked less rumpled today, but no less distracted. He didn't go to the counter. He took a seat at a small table by the window and pulled out a laptop. Eliza approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Can I get you something on the house?" "Obviously." He looked up, a faint smile on his face. "A black coffee would be great, and maybe one of those lemon loaves if there's any left." She brought them over, setting them down. She hovered, the words stuck in her throat. "I don't know how to do this," she finally said. "The debt, thank you, all of it." "Don't thank me yet," he said, taking a sip of coffee. "I didn't just give you money, Eliza. I made an investment, and investors usually want a plan." Her heart sank. Here it was, the strings, a plan. "You're a brilliant baker. The cake the girls brought home was incredible, but this place was failing. Why?" The blunt question stung. "Location, competition, overhead, grief," she listed, her voice flat. "Grief I understand," he said quietly. "The others are business problems, solvable ones." He turned his laptop screen toward her. It wasn't a spreadsheet, it was a website mock-up. The Daily Rise was in an elegant script. Underneath, a tagline, "Bread, cakes, community." "I'm a writer," he said. "I tell stories for a living. This bakery has a better story than any I've made up in years. A love story, a lost story, a survival story. People don't just buy bread. They buy the story behind it." He clicked, and the mock-up changed to a social media page filled with professional photos of artisanal loaves, behind-the-scenes shots of baking, and a series titled The Recipe Box, featuring old family recipes from neighborhood families. "My proposal is this," Daniel continued. I become your silent partner. My investment clears the debt. In return, I help you rebrand, build an online presence, and structure a business that works. We tell the story of this place, the real one. We make it a community hub, not just a store. When you're profitable, you start buying me out at a fair rate. No crazy interest, just a path forward. Eliza stared at the screen. It was visionary. It was everything she and Ben had dreamed of but lacked the skill to execute. It was also a terrifying leap, letting this stranger into the heart of her dream, making it a shared dream. And why would you do all that? You have your own work, she asked, suspicion lingering. He closed the laptop. 2 reasons. First, my girls think you're a hero. I'd like them to be right. Second, he paused, choosing his words carefully. After my wife died, I buried myself in words. In fictional worlds, it's safe there. This, he gestured around the bakery. This is real, flour is real, ovens are real, community is real. I think I need some real. The honesty disarmed her completely. She saw not a wealthy benefactor, but another lost person, using his resources to find a lifeline back to the world. It was a pivot that reframed everything. This wasn't charity. It wasn't a takeover. It was a partnership proposed by 2 wounded people, each holding a piece of the puzzle the other needed. Eliza took a deep breath, the smell of yeast and coffee filling her lungs. Okay, she said. Okay, let's make a plan. For the next 2 weeks, a new rhythm emerged. Daniel would arrive mid-morning with his laptop, working in the corner. They'd talk in bursts between customers. He interviewed her about Ben, about their recipes, about her vision. He took photos. He built a website and social media accounts, launching them with a simple post. We almost closed. Then 3 little girls and a cake happened. Our story and a new start. The response was immediate and local. The story was picked up by the neighborhood blog, then the city paper. The bakery saved by a lie was an irresistible headline. People flocked in, not just for pastries, but for the narrative. But with visibility came new problems. The corporate coffee chain, Perk Up, was not happy. Their expansion plan for the block was now in jeopardy. Their local manager, a sharply ambitious woman named Cora, began a quiet campaign. A health inspector showed up 3 days in a row, finding minor, fixable issues, but it created an atmosphere of harassment. Yelp reviews from brand new accounts suddenly appeared, calling the bakery overhyped and unclean. The stakes were escalating. This was no longer just about survival, it was a turf war. The tension came to a head on a Friday afternoon. Eliza was in the back, pulling a batch of sourdough from the oven, when she heard a familiar, icy voice at the counter. "I'd like to speak with the owner." Eliza walked out, still holding her peel. Cora from Perk Up stood there, wearing a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Eliza Vance, I'm Cora Evans. I think we're going to be neighbors. I wanted to welcome you to the block and discuss coexistence." Daniel, sensing trouble, stood up from his table. "Coexistence?" Eliza asked, setting the peel down. "Yes, see, Perk Up has an exclusivity clause in our lease agreements for a 3-block radius. This address was supposed to be part of our portfolio. Your continued operation here, especially as a competing food service, is in violation of that clause." Daniel stepped forward. That clause would only be valid if the landlord signed it, which he didn't because the foreclosure was stopped. Cora's smile tightened. "Our legal team is reviewing the validity of that debt satisfaction. It was quite an irregular transaction. In the meantime, we're prepared to make you a very generous offer to vacate voluntarily, enough to pay back your new friend and walk away with a tidy profit." She slid a document across the counter. The buyout number was staggering. It was more money than Eliza had ever dreamed of having. It was freedom from all worry, from Daniel's investment, from the exhausting daily grind. Eliza looked at the number. She looked at Daniel, who was watching her, his expression unreadable. She looked around her bakery, now humming with the life she'd thought was gone forever. She thought of Ben's sketch on the napkin. She thought of 3 little girls in matching aprons, trusting her to make a birthday cake. She pushed the document back. "This is my home, I'm not leaving." Cora's smile vanished. "That's unfortunate. This neighborhood is evolving, Ms. Vance. It's becoming modern, efficient. There's no room for sentimental little shops that rely on fairy tale rescues." Her eyes flicked to Daniel with disdain. "Or the charity of bored novelists." She turned and left, the bell jangling aggressively behind her. The bakery was silent. The few customers had stopped pretending not to listen. Daniel let out a long breath. "Well, she's not wrong about the legal team. They will come at us hard." Eliza felt the fear, cold and sharp, but beneath it for the first time was a solid core of anger. "What do we do?" "We fight," Daniel said, a new intensity in his eyes. "But we can't just fight them in court. We have to win the street. We have to make this bakery so essential to the community that Perk Up trying to crush us becomes a PR nightmare for them." He grabbed his laptop, his mind racing. "We need an event, something big, something that makes us the heart of this neighborhood, not just a shop in it." "What kind of event?" Eliza asked, the fear receding before the wave of his certainty. Daniel looked at her, a wild, creative light in his eyes. "A birthday party. A huge, block-wide, epic birthday party." Eliza was confused. "Whose birthday?" Daniel grinned. "The bakery's. We're going to throw the Daily Rise a grand reopening party, 1 week from today, and we're going to invite the whole city." The audacity of it took her breath away. It was brilliant and terrifying. It was a direct challenge. It was also a monumental amount of work for a bakery that was still finding its feet. "But we can't. The logistics, the cost, the—" "We can," Daniel interrupted, his writer's brain now firing on all cylinders, weaving a new plot. "We'll get other local businesses involved. The flower shop, the bookstore, the toy store. We'll have live music, face painting, cake decorating for kids. We'll bake a cake so big it'll be in the papers. We'll make it a celebration of independent businesses, a stand against the chains. We'll give them a story they can't ignore." He was painting a picture so vivid Eliza could almost see it. The street filled with people, music, the smell of baking filling the air. It was the opposite of the quiet failure she had expected. It was a defiant, joyful roar. But as the excitement bubbled up, a cold, practical thought drowned it. She looked at her nearly empty pantry, at her single, overworked oven. She looked Daniel dead in the eye, voicing the terrifying final hurdle. "Daniel," she said, her voice quiet, "to do that, I need to bake more in 1 week than I have in the past 2 months. I need supplies I can't afford, help I can't pay for, and a miracle. Where, in all this beautiful storytelling, do we find that?" Daniel's smile didn't fade. It just changed, turning from the warm enthusiasm of a storyteller to the cold, calculating grin of a strategist. "We find it," he said, "by calling in every favor, leveraging every connection, and making this the one story in town nobody can look away from. But first, we need to make a list. And then you need to teach me how to bake." The next 72 hours were a blur of manic energy. Daniel's plan unfolded in 3 simultaneous fronts. First, the narrative. He wrote a press release that was less an announcement and more a manifesto. Independent bakery declares birthday for community, invites city to celebrate local business. He sent it to every newspaper, blog, and local TV station, framing the party not as a desperate promotional stunt, but as a joyful act of defiance. Second, the alliances. He and Eliza walked the block, knocking on every neighboring shop door. Mrs. Gable at the flower shop agreed to provide decorations at cost. The used bookstore owner, an old friend of Daniel's from his early writing days, offered to host a children's story time corner. The retired musician from the apartment above the hardware store volunteered to play acoustic guitar. The party was no longer just the bakery. It was becoming the neighborhood. But the third front was the hardest, the baking itself. Eliza's pantry was a ghost town. To feed a block party, she needed industrial quantities of flour, butter, sugar, eggs. The wholesale distributor required upfront payment she didn't have. This is where Daniel's first revelation landed. He made a phone call, put it on speaker for Eliza to hear. "Jerry, Daniel Hayes. Yeah, long time. Listen, I need a favor. A big one." He explained the situation, the party, the fight against the chain. Jerry, it turned out, was the owner of the largest independent food supplier in the region. He was also, as Daniel casually mentioned after hanging up, a huge fan of his books. "The shipment arrives tomorrow," Daniel said. "Payable in 60 days. He said to consider it an advance on the next great American novel." Eliza was stunned. "You just called in a favor for a novel that doesn't exist." "I called in a favor for a story that does exist," Daniel corrected. "Our story, it's collateral." The supplies arrived, a pallet of ingredients that filled the back kitchen, a tangible promise of the scale they were attempting. Now came the labor. Eliza's one pair of hands couldn't possibly do it. Daniel rolled up his sleeves, literally. His first lesson in baking was how to properly measure flour without packing it down. He was a disaster, clumsy, impatient, his writer's mind wandering to plot points while he over-kneaded dough. But he was also determined. He brought the girls after school, assigning them simple, safe tasks like wrapping cookie dough logs in parchment. The daily rise transformed from a shop into a chaotic, flour-dusted war room. But here's the thing about declaring war on a corporate giant. They have more weapons. The wait, it gets worse moment came on Wednesday, 3 days before the party. Daniel was at his usual table, finalizing the event permits with the city, another hurdle he'd quietly cleared using his publisher's legal contacts. Eliza was in the back, testing a recipe for a giant cupcake tower that would serve as the party's centerpiece. The bell chimed. It wasn't a customer. It was a process server. "Daniel Hayes?" the man asked, his voice bored. Daniel looked up. "Yes." "You've been served." The man handed him a thick envelope and left. Daniel opened it, his face growing paler with each line. It wasn't from Perk Up. It was from a firm called Lexington and Pierce. The heading made his blood run cold. "Cease and desist. Violation of non-compete and intellectual property agreement." Eliza came out, wiping her hands. "What is it?" "It's from my old publisher," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "The one I left 2 years ago. They're claiming my public involvement with a retail food service venture violates the non-compete clause in my old contract. They're demanding I sever all ties with the bakery immediately or face a lawsuit that would," he trailed off, scanning the legalese. "That would claim all royalties from my last book as damages." The room tilted. The last book, the one that had paid for the bakery's rescue. "That's insane," Eliza cried. "You're a writer, not a baker. How is this competing?" "Because my name and likeness are now intrinsically tied to the bakery's commercial success," Daniel read, his jaw tight. "They're arguing I've become a spokesperson, that I'm using my author platform to promote a business which they claim is a conflict. They must have seen the press releases. Cora from Perk Up probably sent it to them. This is a precision strike." The weight of it crushed the budding optimism in the room. This wasn't harassment from a health inspector. This was a legal torpedo aimed at the very foundation of their partnership. Daniel's involvement wasn't just helpful, it was the engine of their entire strategy. Without him, the story died. The party would be just a poorly attended bake sale. "They want me to walk away," Daniel whispered, more to himself than to her, "to prove you can't win." Eliza felt a surge of protective fury. "Then we fight it, we get a lawyer." "Fighting it takes months, years, and money we don't have. The party is in 72 hours. He ran a hand through his hair, the picture of defeat. For the first time, Eliza saw the cracks in his calm facade. The pressure of his own grief, his children, his career, and now this, it was all too much. But then he looked at her. He saw the fury in her eyes, the same defiant spark that had made her bake a cake for 3 lying children while her own world ended. He straightened up. "No," he said, the word quiet but firm. I'm not walking away. Let them sue. My lawyer will handle the paperwork. In the meantime, we have a birthday party to throw." It was a line in the sand, but the fallout was immediate. By that afternoon, a gossip item appeared in a popular industry blog. Best-selling author Daniel Hayes embroiled in legal trouble over quaint bakery investment. The tone was sneering, painting him as a gullible artist being taken advantage of by a struggling business. It was a narrative designed to embarrass and isolate. Worse, it worked on one key front. The musician called, apologetic, saying he didn't want to get mixed up in any litigation. The bookstore friend suddenly found his calendar unfortunately full. The first cracks in their coalition were appearing. This was the second-order consequence. The corporate attack wasn't just aimed at breaking them legally, it was aimed at breaking their spirit and their community. It was a message: step out of line and we will make you radioactive. That night, after a long, silent shift of baking, Eliza found Daniel sitting alone in the darkened bakery, staring at the giant cupcake tower dummy. "Maybe they're right," he said without looking at her. "Maybe this was a stupid, sentimental gamble. I dragged you into my midlife crisis, and now I've made you a target." Eliza didn't speak. She walked to the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, and locked it. Then she walked behind the counter and pulled out 2 small, dusty bottles of Belgian ale Ben had stashed away for a celebration that never came. She opened them, handed one to Daniel, and sat across from him. "My husband," she said, taking a sip, "was an engineer. He believed in physics, in cause and effect. If you apply force here, you get movement there." She pointed at the cupcake tower. That's not physics, that's faith. You walked in here and you had faith in a story. For the first time since Ben died, someone looked at my crumbling life and didn't see a liability. You saw an asset. You saw a story worth telling." She leaned forward. "So they're suing you for believing in something. Fine, let them. I'll testify. I'll tell the whole courtroom about the 3 little girls and the cake and the check. I'll make them cry. But we are not stopping, because tomorrow we are going to bake like hell. And the day after that, we are going to throw a party that this street will remember long after Perk Up is a forgotten footnote." Daniel looked at her, the defeat in his eyes receding, replaced by a stunned, profound respect. He clinked his bottle against hers. "To faith," he said. The following day, Thursday, was their final push. They baked from pre-dawn to past midnight. The kitchen was a symphony of timers and mixing bowls. Daniel, while still not a natural baker, became a competent sous chef, managing inventory, prepping pans, and keeping the girls fed and entertained. The tension was still there, the legal threat a cloud over them, but it was met with a focused, shared determination. Then, at 10 p.m., as they were loading the last trays of cupcake batter into the fridge to chill overnight, the "it gets even bigger" moment hit. The back door, which led to the alley where they took deliveries, flew open with a crash. Not from a person, from a torrent of murky, foul-smelling water. It gushed across the kitchen floor, swirling around their ankles, soaking the bottom boxes of supplies. Eliza screamed. Daniel lunged for the door, shoving against the flow to peer into the alley. The main sewer drain for the building was vomiting water into the alley, and it was flooding directly into their kitchen. "Call the landlord, call a plumber," Daniel yelled, wadding to the electrical panel to shut off power to the outlets on the floor. But Eliza knew. As she dialed with shaking, flour-caked hands, she knew. This was no coincidence. The timing was too perfect. The party was in less than 36 hours, and their kitchen, their battlefield, was being flooded. The landlord's answering service picked up. The emergency plumber said he couldn't come for at least 4 hours. By then, everything on the floor, bags of sugar, boxes of butter, hundreds of pre-portioned cookie dough balls, would be ruined. The loss wasn't just the supplies, it was the time they did not have. Daniel stood in the ankle-deep water, his face a mask of utter despair. This wasn't a legal letter. This was physical, visceral sabotage. It was a message written in sewage. We can break your things. We can destroy your work. Eliza sank onto a dry step stool, watching the dirty water lap at the legs of her stainless steel tables. She felt the fight drain out of her. This was too much. This was dirty. This was real. Then she looked at Daniel, standing defeated in the muck. She thought of Chloe, Sophie, and Grace, so proud of their daddy's bakery project. She thought of Ben's napkin sketch. A cold, clear rage settled over her grief and her fear. She stood up. "Get the trash bags," she said, her voice eerily calm. "What?" "Get every trash bag, every storage bin, every cooler you can find. We're not waiting for a plumber." She waded to the supply shelves and started hauling the unopened, upper-level bags of flour and sugar to safety on the higher counter. "We're moving everything. Now. Then we're cleaning this floor. Then we're baking through the night." Daniel stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Eliza, the health code." "The health code won't matter if we're not open at all," she snapped, her composure breaking for a second. "This is what they want, for us to quit. Well, I didn't quit when Ben died. I didn't quit when the bank came. I am not quitting because of some dirty water and a bully in a suit." Her outburst echoed in the flooded room. Then a slow, fierce smile spread across Daniel's face. He didn't see a widow on the edge anymore. He saw a general. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and grabbed an armful of trash bags. They worked in frantic silence for an hour, a desperate salvage operation. They saved about 70% of their prep supplies. The rest, contaminated, went into sealed bags. At 11 p.m., the plumber finally arrived, fixed a sudden and severe blockage in the main line. A blockage, he noted, that looked suspiciously like it had been caused by a large, deliberate clog. Sabotage confirmed. By midnight, the water was gone, the floors were bleached and mopped, and the kitchen smelled harshly of disinfectant. They were exhausted, demoralized, and 3 critical hours behind schedule. They stood amid the sterile, chaotic space. The giant cupcake tower, their centerpiece, was still just a foam dummy. Hundreds of cookies, cupcakes, and loaves needed to be finished, baked, and decorated. It was impossible. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Gable at the flower shop. "Heard about the flood. So sorry. Me and the girls are coming at 6 a.m. to help decorate whatever you've got. Don't you dare say no." Then another from the barber who'd heard from the mailman. "My wife and her sister are great with frosting. They'll be there at 7. A third from a neighbor they'd never met. "We've been following the story online. We have industrial mixers. Can we loan them to you tonight?" The coalition wasn't broken. The attack had backfired. The story of the flood, of the blatant sabotage, spread through the neighborhood grapevine faster than the legal gossip ever had. It transformed the party from a simple celebration into a cause. Daniel showed Eliza the texts, his eyes shining with something more than relief, with wonder. "They're coming," he said. "The cavalry is coming." Eliza looked at the messages, then at their salvaged supplies, then at Daniel's grease-stained, exhausted face. She nodded, the weight lifting just enough to let her breathe. "Then we'd better have something for them to save." They didn't sleep. They baked. And as the first hint of dawn painted the sky, a miracle began to take shape. Not the kind from a checkbook, but the kind built by faith, flour, and a neighborhood deciding which story it wanted to tell. The battle lines were drawn, the weapons were baked goods, and the final showdown was just one sunrise away. Dawn on Saturday didn't arrive gently. It was heralded by the rumble of folding tables being carried out onto the sidewalk, the hiss of a borrowed coffee urn, and the determined laughter of a dozen neighbors who showed up not out of obligation, but for a fight. The flood had been the final insult. The party was now the collective rebuttal. By 8 a.m., the block in front of the Daily Rise was unrecognizable. Mrs. Gable's flowers hung in baskets from the lampposts. The barber's wife and her sister had taken command of the cupcake decoration station, their frosting bags moving with military precision. The borrowed industrial mixers hummed in the kitchen, manned by volunteers Eliza had met only hours before. The giant cupcake tower, once a foam dummy, was now a six-tiered masterpiece of chocolate and vanilla, covered in buttercream rosettes and crowned with a single, sparkly candle. Eliza moved through the chaos in a state of serene shock. She was no longer the sole architect of this day. She was the conductor of an orchestra that had assembled itself. Daniel was everywhere, setting up speaker wires, wrangling his girls into their matching aprons, giving a rushed interview to a local news crew that had picked up on the David versus Goliath angle. At 10 a.m., the mayor cut the ceremonial ribbon, a last-minute coup Daniel had arranged through a college friend. The street filled with people, not just the curious, but regulars from before the fall, new followers of the online story, and families from 3 neighborhoods over who believed in supporting the little guy. The line for free samples snaked around the corner. Then, at 11:15, the opposition arrived. A sleek black corporate sedan pulled up at the edge of the celebration. Cora from Perk Up stepped out, accompanied by a man in an even sharper suit, likely their head of expansion. They didn't approach the bakery. They stood across the street, observing. Their presence was a cold splash of reality, a reminder that this victory was temporary if the business couldn't sustain itself. Daniel saw them first. He met Eliza's eyes across the crowd and gave a slight nod. The second act of the day was beginning. He climbed onto the small makeshift stage they'd set up for the musician, who, after seeing the turnout, had shown up after all. Litigation fears be damned. Daniel took the microphone. The crowd's cheerful din slowly quieted. "Thank you all for coming to our unbirthday party," he began, his writer's voice projecting easily. "A few weeks ago, this bakery was closed, a story that was supposed to end. Then 3 little girls told a lie to a woman with a big heart. That lie became a cake. That cake became a conversation. And that conversation became this." He gestured to the vibrant street. This is what a community looks like when it chooses its own story." The crowd cheered. He waited for it to settle. "Now I'm a storyteller by trade, and every good story needs a villain." A wave of laughter. He didn't smile. He pointed subtly across the street. "Some see progress as a spreadsheet. They see a street like this and see demographics and market saturation. They don't see Mr. Henderson getting his morning scone and talking about his grandkids. They don't see the kids learning to decorate cookies. They see inefficiency." The mood shifted, becoming more focused, more serious. "So today isn't just a party, it's a statement. And to make that statement permanent, the Daily Rise needs to do more than survive one great day. It needs to thrive." He took a deep breath. This was the pivot they'd planned in the bleary, flower-dusted hours of the night. That's why, as of this moment, we are launching the Community Rise initiative. A portion of every sale will go into a micro-grant fund to help other local, independent businesses on this block with their own projects, new signage, a website, a marketing push. We rise together, or we don't rise at all. The applause was thunderous. It was a brilliant move. It transformed the bakery from a beneficiary of community help into its engine. It made the fight about the whole ecosystem, not just one shop. Cora and her colleague across the street were now having a heated, low-voiced discussion. The PR disaster they had hoped to create was now a PR tsunami crashing over them. Trying to crush the bakery now meant crushing a visible, popular community fund. The party roared on. By 2 p.m., they had completely sold out of every scrap of baked goods. The giant cupcake tower was devoured by delighted children. The donation jar for the community fund was overflowing with cash. As the crowds began to thin, Eliza finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion and the triumph. They had done it. The bakery was not just saved, it was reborn with a purpose bigger than herself. That's when the final, surprising detail unfolded. Daniel's lawyer called. On speakerphone, amidst the cleanup, he delivered the news. The law firm representing Daniel's old publisher had withdrawn the cease and desist. Furthermore, Perkup's parent corporation, facing a potential social media firestorm over the sabotage allegations and the overwhelmingly positive press from the party, had instructed their local team to stand down. The exclusivity clause claim was being dropped. The message was clear. This fight was more expensive than it was worth. The victory was complete, legal, commercial, communal. That evening, after the last table was folded and the last dish washed, Eliza and Daniel sat on the bakery floor, backs against the display case, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of success. The girls were asleep in a nest of aprons in the corner. "We did it," Eliza said, the words barely a whisper. "We did," Daniel agreed. He was quiet for a moment. "My lawyer said something else, the publisher who dropped the suit. They want to talk about a new book, a nonfiction one, about all this." Eliza looked at him, stunned. "You're going to write about this?" "Only if you say yes," he said. "It would be our story. The profits would be split. It could be an endowment for the community fund, a way to make it last." The offer was staggering. It was the final loop, closed with perfect symmetry. The lie that started with a story had spawned a real one, which would now become a permanent record, funding the very community that inspired it. Eliza thought of Ben's napkin sketch. He hadn't just drawn a bakery, he'd drawn a place where people connected. This was that place, amplified beyond their wildest dreams. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes. 6 months later, the rhythm of the daily rise was nothing like the desperate struggle of before, or even the frantic euphoria of the party. It was a steady, confident heartbeat at the center of the block. The community fund had already helped the flower shop launch a website and the bookstore host a local author series. The perk up that was supposed to open next door never materialized. The corporate lease had been quietly terminated. One crisp autumn morning, Eliza was arranging a new batch of sourdough, a recipe she developed with Daniel, named the Second Rise. The bell chimed. It was Daniel, holding 2 coffees and a copy of a glossy magazine. "Have you seen this?" he asked, his eyes bright. It was a prominent food and culture magazine. The cover headline read, "The Recipe for Revival: How a Bakery, a Lie, and a Community Rewrote the Rules." The cover photo was of Eliza, Daniel, and the girls, covered in flour, laughing in the middle of the birthday party chaos. Inside was a sprawling feature article, but it was the final paragraph Daniel pointed to. It revealed the surprising detail they'd kept private. The article confirmed that the advance for Daniel's upcoming book, The Daily Rise, A True Story, had already been used to formally establish the community fund as a permanent nonprofit. And the first major donor, listed anonymously but easily guessed by anyone who read the business pages, was the parent corporation of Perk Up. A donation made, the article suggested, as part of a broader ethical business initiative. The final weapon in the corporate arsenal had been turned into the foundation's cornerstone. The ultimate victory wasn't just surviving the attack, but converting the attacker's resources for your own cause. Eliza looked from the magazine to the bakery, now bustling with the morning rush. She saw the regulars, the new faces, the children pointing at the cakes. She saw her own reflection in the glass of the display case, no longer etched with exhausted sadness, but with a calm, hard-won joy. The story that began with a closed sign and a lie had reached its promised end. A family had been pieced back together, not by blood, but by choice, flour, and an unexpected partnership. A business had been saved, and in saving itself, had learned how to save others. The narrative was complete, but as any good baker knows, the story of a community never really ends. It just finds a new shape, rises again, and waits for the next person to walk through the door, hungry for connection. So what's the real recipe here? It wasn't just flour, sugar, and eggs. It was a lie born from love, met with grace instead of anger. It was the courage to accept help from a stranger, and the greater courage to turn that help into a legacy for others. Eliza Vance and Daniel Hayes started as 2 broken pieces from different puzzles. Through a series of unlikely events, they discovered they could fit together to make something entirely new, something stronger than what they had before. Their story forces us to ask a bigger question. In our own lives, how often do we mistake a closed sign for a final ending? How often do we see someone struggling, a business, a neighbor, a stranger, and write them off as a lost cause without considering the unseen ingredients waiting to be mixed? Community, ingenuity, and a simple act of faith. The battle for the daily rise was never just about pastries. It was a fight for narrative. Would this street be defined by spreadsheets and efficiency, or by human connection and resilience? The answer came not from a boardroom, but from a kitchen, from sidewalk tables, and from the collective decision of everyday people to invest in a story they believed in. That's the powerful truth this story leaves us with. Change doesn't always start with a grand plan or a huge budget. Sometimes, it starts with 3 little girls and a $20 bill. It starts with choosing curiosity over judgment. It starts with showing up with a trash bag to help clean up a flood, or with a frosting bag to decorate a stranger's cupcakes. Our world is built, block by block, by these small, seemingly insignificant choices to lean in, not look away. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been part of something like this? Have you witnessed a small act of kindness or community spirit that unexpectedly snowballed into something much bigger? Or have you been the one who needed the help, only to find it in the most surprising place? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story of resilience and connection warmed your heart, please give this video a like. It truly helps support the channel. Share it with a friend who might need a reminder that good people and second chances are everywhere. And if you want to join us for more real-life stories that explore the depth of the human spirit, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most beautiful communities aren't found, they're baked. One choice, one connection, one cake at a time.